Two. Get a motion to accept the minutes. We were able to knock those out from the 10th meeting. Motion. Second. And to accept it from 4:10. And the next WMAC meeting is going to be, we're back onto the regular schedule now. May 1st.
Me?
I got it.
6 p.m. I don't have any other correspondence other than the Pridland Hotel,
So on May 1st at what time?
6 p.m.
6, thank you.
6 p.m. That's on the town calendar, on the website.
That is right.
Here comes Jim.
Yep. There he is. No problem. We just went through the minutes and next meeting. So Rob Coburn is here representing the Pridland Hotel. They're looking to put a number of moorings off their waterfront. And I'll let him explain the deal instead of me.
So we spoke with you on your March meeting about the need, and I just want to, especially if anyone's watching this on videotape later, hasn't been involved, know that the reason for this for us is just a safety issue. We've had, it's really started, and Greg Petrie would say about 20 years ago, a little bit more, that the wake action at the docks began increasing, probably because of the bulkhead, increasingly exposed bulkhead, and some larger boats and more boats going down the channel in the summer. So get to a point where even on calm days, we have 1 to 1.5 foot waves pretty constantly at the dock. And even with fenders, it's become, we believe, dangerous to keep boats at the dock, dangerous for the boats, dangerous for people when the boats sit there for a long time. That's the desire for it, is to just get a safer place to do it. I know there have been some questions in the last meeting and some questions expressed to us by others about expansion of use. Just to be clear, we only have 49 guest rooms and cottages, that's it. We only have 100 restaurant seats and bar seats. Both of those are actually reductions from what the Pridland used to be 55 rooms and 275 seats. So we're a smaller business than before our renovation. We're not going to let people stay on the boats overnight. We're not looking to make an extra room on the property. We just want to give, it's basically, think of it, in my opinion, as a parking space. Instead of someone coming by car, coming by Uber, they come by boat, they leave their boat there for a meal, leave their boat there overnight with no one on it as they stay in the guest room. And that's the request for the moorings, is a place to put those boats where they're physically safer and where there's less risk to life and limb. We presented some materials which hopefully you've seen, but we also had, at the request of the town, which I think was a good idea, conference to just clarify some legal ownership issues, which I think Steve is on, we could address if you want, and just for the board members and for the town attorney to understand a little better the background for our application. And in that, it was suggested to us that we document a little bit some of the historical use, because historically boats have. So in that package is a photograph, a couple of photographs. The idea was to determine sort of how many boats have been at the Pridland historically when it was safer to tie up at the dock. There's a photograph in there that shows actually a total of 10 boats at the main dock, but one of them is double tied. So it's really 9 boats located at the dock. And it's hard to see in the other photograph, but if you had a magnifying glass, you'd see, I believe it's 7, may only be 6, but I believe it's 7 boats at the western dock, in addition to a handful of boats anchored around. We're not looking to recreate this volume. This is probably peak volume for boats at the Pridland. We don't know this photograph, but there's a good chance it might have been one of the ones that were used. So that's peak usage. Our expectation is that we would have a demand on an average day for 6 to 12 boats. That's our expectation for demand. And if, we've applied for 8 moorings, if there are 8 moorings and it's too rough to tie up at the dock, guess what? We only have room for 8 boats on the moorings, and that's it. The other thing I'll let you know is You may or may not believe this, but we're as interested in orderly use of these if they are approved as the town is. So here are some principles. I can give a copy of this when I'm done, but these are subject to change, but I want to let you know what we're, the drafts, this is what we're thinking about. First of all, no boats over 50 feet. Just won't take them, sadly, we'll have to help them find other accommodations. No overnight occupancy on any moored or docked boat. No daytime occupancy of any moored or docked boat other than for purposes of arrival and departure, unless a crew stays on. The captain and crew, if the owner decides to keep them. But if that's the case, this is true for everyone, no running of engines beyond minimal requirements, audio systems or generators on moored or docked. We're going to provide tender services either directly or through third-party providers. We're still working on that. We will have a charge for mooring and dockage for up to 4 hours. We'll have a separate charge added to the room for people who arrive by boat to stay in one of the hotel rooms. We're happy, I don't want to tell you what to do or say, but we're happy to say no more than 16 boats tied at the docks or on the moorings combined, which is what you see sort of at the historic peak usage. We're happy to live with that. At its sole discretion, Pridwin may request that any moored or tied boat depart the Pridwin. We're the police. And we're gonna, it's right in front of our hotel, right in front of the deck. If there's bad behavior, if there's something that's not working, we're gonna try to address it constructively. If we can't, we're gonna ask the people to leave. That's how we run our businesses. And we're gonna require boat owners or captains to sign a form acknowledging the rules and principles that are in place every time. So we have that on file. And, we're going to strive at all times to operate them in a safe way and in a way that's respectful to neighbors. I think we mentioned last time, but it's worth mentioning, while there's a lot of boat pressure in the channel, 600 to 800 feet away, there's not a lot of near shore boat pressure. There's some paddle boarding. The sailing for Quinnipiac happens about 500 to 600 feet west of us and further, really right off of their western dock. And so frankly, we don't expect a lot of interference or concern or issues with respect to other traffic. I think I'll stop there and ask any questions or.
Well, that's a good overview to the point. I have one comment. I like the philosophy you're bringing to this. As far as good intentions, if they're not put in writing and part of the resolution,
yeah,
those could change with the different management. The moorings will still be there, and we may have moved on,
yeah,
and the next generation is going to have to deal with it. So I think as far as the good intention goes, that you have to figure, for me, I want to see which ones you're willing to put in writing as part of the resolution.
sure. Okay.
Could you, to that point, could you say the part of, that you mentioned daytime occupancy?
No daytime. We don't want people tying up and either before or after their meal, sitting out in the back of their boat with music on, drinking,
Right.
It's not gonna happen.
Okay.
They can stay on the boat as they need to moor it and to prepare to depart. And if a captain and crew is on a private boat with that kind of thing, they can stay on, but they can't that. Can't run generators, can't play music, just sit quietly and respectfully.
Great.
We're totally willing to put that into writing. This is where we're gonna be harder police than you might be on this.
Yeah.
Who's the
It's
fish?
right in front of our deck. And that's the money shot for the Pridwin in the summer.
Yeah.
It's a copy of everything you read just right there.
I do. It is in draft form and we ask, it says subject to amendment, but yeah, I'm happy to, I'll give this to Christina.
Yeah, I'll send some copies for everybody.
Rob, let me ask you if guests do want to arrive by boat, stay overnight, where they park?
Where do they park the boat?
Yeah.
On one of the moorings. We would put it on one of the moorings. I'm sorry, I apologize.
One or both fish.
Yes.
So the boat will stay overnight on the mooring?
The boat would stay overnight on the mooring, yes.
It says in your application, there's some historic precedent for that.
Yeah,
What happened at the Ramsat, people would occasionally come,
yeah.
leave the boat in the morning, take a room. No?
Occasionally.
Yeah.
We didn't have any requests last summer, I'll just be honest with you. I think Greg Petrie, who was going to try to get on, but he was unlikely to be able to make it, has said that for the last 5 years that they were open, it happened one to three times a summer. But, back in the 90s, the aughts, the 90s and the 80s, They had a couple nights where they had, 2 or 3 boats tied up overnight at the docks when it was safer to do that. But it's, just to be clear, may or may not be the purview of this committee, but it should be, I suppose, a concern of yours. We're in the business of selling hotel rooms. No matter what we charge as a mooring fee, we do better business and we build better relations with our employees for our purposes if they stay in a hotel room or a cottage. So we'll accommodate their boat, but we will not let them stay in the boat.
If
What
anybody,
about their captain and crew?
If they bring a captain and crew, they would have to get a hotel room for the captain and crew.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
if anybody doubts the claim that it's very rough there and the dockage is a tough thing to accomplish, just look at how Greg ties his boat up.
Yeah, that was Dick. He was a stickler for it, but I'll let you know, the day after our last meeting, there was a good wind blowing, it's probably 25 miles an hour out of the northwest. There were 2-foot waves coming into the dock from Southold, and there were 1 to 1.5-foot waves going crossways off of the bulkhead west to east. It was, I wish I'd taken a video for your, that's the issue, when it happens, even in lighter winds, when the tide's running out in particular. And it happens when there's a parade of bigger boats through the channel.
Especially.
It's the deflection off the bulkhead that's really gotten worse. Because, and I don't have the pictures or the exact history. I understand that as recently as 2005, the bulkhead was unexposed past the 85 Shore Road dock to the west of us. Most of the way to the first Quinnipiac dock was exposed beach at high tide. That bulkhead is now 250 to 300 feet further. It's about 15 feet west of our shoreline is the exposed beach. Otherwise, water's hitting the bulkhead. There's just more bulkhead to bounce waves off of. That's the culprit here. I've had a preliminary discussion with Joe Fenora on this to just try to get some good ideas on public-private partnerships for how we can try to make it better. And if we can wave a wand and make that better, maybe we get moorings. Can I just also say, in response to bad behavior and putting things in writing, I know it's probably not what you expect, but my understanding is the town has the legal right for any or no reason to not renew a mooring permit or to pull it every year, I believe. Steve, you can tell me if that's different, but I'll say 2 things. If we get some moorings approved and someone on this board or someone from the town feels there's a legitimate reason that we're not using them best or that we need to do something different, even with the permit in hand, we're committed to working to do it different. We're happy to adjust. And if someone comes back and says, hey, this happened 8 times, you said it wouldn't, this is bad, there's no other way to address it, you're losing a mooring, I understand that. I know you probably don't want to do it, no one's have to enforce that way, but we know that this is a little new ground and we need to prove that we're going to use them.
Back up just to set the stage for 1 minute. We will be having a vote, but it's going to be a vote I'm going to allow comments to accompany your vote. All right.
Can you explain the ownership of the property structure to me? Who's the actual natural person behind?
Sure. And then this is something specifically that Steve brought to my attention, and I've sent him some documents, so I won't speak. Do you want to speak, Steve, or do you want me to address it first?
Why don't you address it first?
Okay. So the Petries remain investors in the hotel. The entity that was the long-standing entity as ownership of the hotel is still a partner in the business. They have voting rights. They are a major partner in the business. There are then 2 layers of new corporate entities. The owner of the hotel is called Cape Pridwin Owner, LLC, the Delaware LLC. And then there's an entity above that owns 100% of that entity called Cape Pridwin JV, LLC. And the Petries, through their historical entity, are members in that LLC. So they have voting interests.
So it's a joint venture and you've got owner on one side. Is there another venture or another venture?
The only partners are the Petries and Cape Resorts. So the Petries have an interest and Cape Resorts has an interest in that Cape Pridwin JV entity.
Okay.
And Glenn Petrie is the owner of record of a property on Rebel Road.
Yeah, well, that's kind of separate and apart from this, but so the applicant here is Cape Pridwin Owner, right?
Cape Pridwin Owner LLC, correct.
can we get the principals of Cape Pridwin Owner LLC? The individuals, the members?
Well, let me speak to this. An attorney opinion letter was tendered here. I don't know if you have a copy of it. Rob, I think it's what you
It was in the package, yeah.
packet. It's dated April 4th, 2023. So it's my understanding that Cape Pridwin Owner LLC is the owner of record for the property.
Correct.
And a member thereof is Cape Pridwin JV LLC.
It's the only member, by the way, just
Okay.
FYI, Steve. Yep.
Okay, so Greg and Glenn Petrie are key principals of Cape Pridwin JV, who is a member of the LLC that owns it, and they're both residents.
Okay, I thought Cape Pridwin JV was the owner of Cape Pridwin Owner.
It is.
Well, the owner of record, like I said, is Cape Pridwin Owner LLC. They own the property.
And that entity is 100% owned by Cape Pridwin JV LLC.
Which, again, Greg and Glenn Petrie are members.
Is there a long list of other members of?
Nope. The only other member is a Cape Resorts entity. I'm a small owner, record in full disclosure, but it's our principal, Curtis Pashaw. It's done through Curtis Pashaw is the managing member of the Cape Resorts portion of that Cape Resorts entity that's invested in.
The reason why I'm asking for individual names is that in order for us to track how many moorings individuals can have on the island, we need to know what interest they have in LLCs. So whether they already have 3 moorings, 2 moorings, 1 mooring.
There's no other investor from Shelter Island that has an interest on the Cape Resort side. FYI, there's none other. If you want me to have that certified too, I'm happy.
Well, so you raise an interesting point. You said from Shelter Island, but the point is that if they are considered an owner of real estate on Shelter Island, then they can get a mooring on Shelter Island.
I think it's unlikely. They're all from New Jersey and a couple from New York City, but
Could be a corporation in Utah, and a shareholder there could be an owner, considered an owner if they own property on Shelter Island.
and that would prohibit them from having another. You need to count to 3 for those for residents.
I would disagree with that. I think it's apples and oranges. I think you have commercial moorings and you have residential moorings. I
So
know.
if we can have commercial entities that have moorings that aren't commercial moorings, the way the code reads.
Bill, if I lived in West Neck and still own Cockles Harbor Marina, then would you take the position that I shouldn't be able to have a residential mooring?
Say it again?
If I lived in West Neck, had a waterfront house in West Neck, would I not be allowed to have a private mooring then?
No. We could have a private mooring.
Well, that's the same thing here.
But he
I already have.
So that's what Stephen's saying, that, they're 2 different things, sort of. He's making a distinction between commercial moorings and residential moorings as a.
When one is limited,
Right.
the other isn't. That's what he's saying.
Yes, I would argue, and I used the wrong terminology. It's private mooring. So I would say that the up to 3 is regarding private moorings, not commercial. Like commercial is.
But a commercial entity can own up to 3 moorings.
No, but we're talking about commercial moorings. We're not talking about.
A commercial entity could own up to 3 non-commercial moorings.
Right.
Residential moorings.
Exactly. Yeah, up to 3 private moorings a commercial entity could have.
That's the point I'm making, is that you can have.
The commercial moorings, we don't have a cap on the number of commercial moorings one commercial entity can have.
I realize that. I'm not talking about commercial moorings. I'm talking about commercial entities that have individual, whatever, residential moorings. So you can have, an individual could have 5 different entities. If we can't identify who the owner is of those entities, then that individual can end up having 5 times 3 moorings.
Is it, let me ask, is the concern that a private individual who is an investor somehow through one of our entities in the Pridwin would essentially use one of these moorings as a private mooring?
No, would apply to get a mooring anywhere on Shelter Island, but I would think that bridge would be, I would think that bridge would be crossed when the application for that mooring came in.
But that's,
Okay, so here's my application, I want a mooring now in Coppell's Harbor, and I'm telling you, I'm an owner at Cape blah, blah. And at that point, this committee would say, yeah, okay, you can approve it.
So,
Right?
so the way we can limit it is to the property. So,
3 private moorings to the property.
right, because the number of individuals that can own or entities that can own is limitless. So the way you limit it is by only 3 moorings, residential moorings per piece of property.
Right now.
But if you then have someone who's got numerous entities and numerous properties, and we can't identify the individual, then that person through all those entities, and that's why I'm trying to identify what entities, what people own in these entities, they could have 5 properties, they could have 15 residential moorings.
but you got,
And they,
again, they're applying right now, what's in front of you is for commercial moorings, has nothing to do with private. So that, it's
I
again.
understand that, but
Referenced.
I understand that they're applying for commercial, but the individuals who are owners of those entities can get residential moorings.
Yeah, but if they applied for a residential mooring, then they would, and they say they're an owner, they would have to give whoever they are. If they were doing it that way, I would guess, right? I mean, if they were applying separately for a residential mooring,
Yeah,
they would have to say, well, I'm Curtis Bashaw, and I'm the principal of this, and I want to have a residential mooring on Shelter Island. So, okay, that's one for him,
Yeah.
This came up, Stephen, when the LLCs, this was about a year and a half, 2 years ago,
No
maybe.
names.
I'm not gonna use names.
Okay.
It came up, and we tried to identify 3 or 4 different properties with names, because they were all applying for private mooring. Nobody was applying for a commercial mooring, they're all private. Our concern was their names could be on all 4 properties, and they could be capitalizing on having more than 3 moorings. Here, Stephen is saying commercial moorings are a whole different thing. So I don't think it comes into play here, because I just don't see, it's a different scenario.
The Petries, each of the Petrie brothers, they could each have up to 3 private moorings based on the math, whatever, how you do it. And that has no bearing on this, because this is, again, apples and that's oranges. So, and, I don't really want to get in, I disagree that we need to be getting into this, because my reading of the code is that if you own property, you're a resident. But again, I'm not going to go down that road here.
No, it's an issue we need to address further. It doesn't apply directly to this, but I still hold that if you are a member or a shareholder in an entity, that you do have the ability, whether you live here or not, just because that entity owns real estate here, you have the ability to apply for a residential mooring. So that's why I'd like to know who those owners are. But I'm not going to beat this dead horse. It is a little bit of a complicated issue that we need to straighten out.
Yeah,
because it gets worse. If you have 5 entities and you can get 15 residential moorings, the next limiting factor is, well, you'd have to have 15 boats.
Yeah,
But you don't, because you're excluded as a commercial entity from having to identify the boat that goes to the mooring.
Correct. So just so you know, since I've been here, we've scrutinized LLC applicants for private moorings. And we make sure that they're not trying to do an end around and they're limited to 3. So we've been doing that.
Okay, so for this purpose, then, owner here is the resident? So the actual, the Pridwin JV is the owner, that is the resident that's applying. And so we're not going to the individuals, the beneficial owners behind it? Because my reading of what Bill sent around was, I thought was reasonably straightforward, that the beneficial ownership needs to be a majority, sort of like individuals need to be a majority of the entity that's applying.
Yeah.
And so on that basis, I would have said that they're not resident, that it's not, the entity that's applying is not a resident
Well,
in an aggregate.
even if that was the avenue you were going down, you have the majority of this organization are residents, are literal residents. So I think they would be able to pass that test.
Wait, how?
The
How do you get majority? Just,
Well,
We don't know the,
as the gentleman just put on the record. Let me see, Cape Pridwin JV LLC, which is the sole member of Cape Pridwin Owner LLC, which is the owner of record who owns the property, has Greg and Glenn Petrie, who are the key principals, and they're the majority, right, Mr. Coburn?
I didn't say that.
no, I didn't hear that.
I heard you say are major participants, but I think that's different here. They're important participants, I think is maybe the way to describe that. Here, they're not majority owners, the way that I read the letter from the lawyer and the way that I read the situation.
But let me just question this. I just based on previous experience here, I thought that we had sort of said that the owner of the property, by virtue of owning the property, is a resident.
Correct.
It's not like that they had to live here.
I think that's important. Yeah, that's what I was just saying.
So in that case, then the resident is applied.
That's where I took my letter to, and what I wanted to point out, the answer to the question is, it doesn't matter. Because if you own, you're a resident.
According to the term.
Which is, to me,
Yeah,
the biggest problem.
the problem. But it is the fact right now.
It is the fact.
Yes, so the definition of resident, and that's why I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole of the organization and the majority of owners and beneficiaries are residents, is because in my mind, the plain meaning reading of resident allows someone who's the owner of real property to get a mooring. That's the definition of, you don't have to live here. You don't have to be a domiciliary. You just own the property.
That's the plain reading according to our code, but I think it's a defect in our code. I know it's a rabbit hole you don't want to get down.
I'm not here to champion. I agree.
I know.
It has to be
Okay.
cleaned up.
I'm being advised not to talk, well advised not to talk. I just want to say, the only practical impact I can see for operationally for us would be if we somehow, through partners or people, had applied for residential moorings and we were going to send boats elsewhere. I can tell you we're not going to do it. If we have requests for more than 8 moorings, we're going to send them to this guy or to someone else, to an establishment that does it. We're not a marina. We'll find a marina for them. We'll advise them as best we can on legal anchorages. But we're not secretly I'm just for the record, we're not secretly stockpiling or keeping track of other moorings that we're aware of, and we would never do that. Just like
The existing mooring going to be part of these 8?
that's going to be removed. That comes up this year anyway. The permit expires this year.
So that's not going to be,
Not gonna
that's
be-
going to be 8 moorings and that's it.
Correct.
Just to so you know, at the outset of my memo that I sent around, the first point I made was that what I'm stating and all the details I went into were not in opposition to this application. It was
Right.
it's just.
I haven't seen it, but it's fine. Thank you. Okay.
Let's see if we can bring this around to the actual 8 moorings that are being applied for and the area that they're in, whether or not that's appropriate. Is there any way to pull up that overhead? Okay. That's good. That's far enough. Maybe back out a little bit more.
And the circles over here, those were Quinnipiac? Is that
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Can you zoom out a little bit more, Christina, please?
He's working on it.
Really, this is a request for 7 moorings.
7 additional moorings, but
The other one was already owned by the Prydwen.
Yes, relocating that existing one. I don't think that was. Yeah.
By virtue of that, it was a commercial mooring.
So the new moorings are gonna go, extend beyond that 3103 Mars mooring
No.
offshore.
Oh, in terms of distance from shore, roughly equal with them.
Right.
Is it over here?
That one. Yeah, yeah.
And there was some mention about the different types of gear. You were gonna try some of the,
Conservation moorings?
yeah.
Because, so I did some research on conservation moorings, and I spoke at Jim's suggestion to Joyce Novak, is that her name? And also spoke with someone up at the Woods Hole Institute who's worked on this issue in Massachusetts, which I think has been on the lead on some of this, or has been, they have a lot of experience. We're not in a flat area, we're subject to heavy tidal flows, and we've got a pretty good, more of a pretty good slope. So we not only don't have, we probably never really had any substantial eelgrass or surface marine life. They're having some issues with conservation moorings, particularly in areas with high currents, even well under the tolerances. They've had 5 incidences in the last 2 years in Massachusetts of boats coming off of breakage. As far as they can tell, they're trying to determine where it is. We're not, the program that PEP wants to get involved in is for higher traffic areas, existing moorings, where there's no eelgrass either now or recently. So they weren't too interested in working with us, but she gave me advice based on her work saying that just unless your engineering folks and others tell you differently, there's not a big benefit to the commercial mooring, to the conservation moorings where you are. So we looked into it. It's been about a week and a half, and but we don't, the tackle is not conservation moorings.
It'll be all pyramids, probably.
Right, I mean, I'm gonna price out, and give them a choice of what, what it's gonna be, and I just concerned I'm gonna do, a visual on the slope there to make sure that we don't get any roll, I mean, a pyramid will be better than a mushroom.
Right.
Mushroom, can start rolling. I do Stewart Bars. And what happens there is that it's deep, so you gotta. He had a mushroom for a while. You end up with a lot of chain, and depending on how you put it in, you can get chain wrap or other things, and you got to make sure that it's got to be large enough so that you pull the bell over so that it digs in, and the thing doesn't roll down the hill. I had 1 year it did roll a bit, and all of a sudden he lost. The scope was
like
gone. Pulling the buoy down. So the idea about installing helix is that you don't have that consequence of something rolling down the back. And so pyramids are an improvement on a mushroom for that. It's just a question if they want to put down the size of a pyramid that we feel that you need for a 45-foot boat, or do you want to, feel that you're comfortable with the helix, which, pricing of things. So if we find that the installation of, putting in, if we mix it up, so at least you put in 4 to 6 of them at their helix, you're probably better off than, the fee of putting in the pyramids. But I want to see it in a spreadsheet for them. They can make the final determination. But, so that's why.
But in any case, it'd be standardized of some sort.
It'd be standardized.
The bigger ones maybe one way and.
There might be 2 or even 3 different tackles depending on the conditions.
Right.
Right, I mean, yeah, because you have different depths and And so that's the.
Flat boats you're gonna consider.
Right, so that's the idea of,
What on the depths?
I think I have it on this. It's between like 14 up to 22 feet. And,
Wow,
you know,
22 feet.
that's what I'm trying to keep it under, you know, when you go out further, you know, where Stewart's, well, outside of where Stewart's is, it was 30 feet. Okay, if you look at the
And
chart.
about another 50 feet offshore, you're down to 40 feet. Starts dropping pretty quickly.
So I wanted to, you know, it's,
Bert did an initial concept that had this a little more square as opposed to rectangular and extending a little further out. And he said, I've got some 35 to 42 foot, you know, depths here, and he didn't recommend it. Is that fair?
yes. Yeah, no, I had them, right, it's a different configuration. I found that the depths was, you know, really makes it much, you know, much more difficult to, you know, to put in the gear to, and then, you know, then your radius gets larger.
Yeah, what kind of radius are you dealing with in that depth for a 50-foot boat? What?
Well, it's up to a 50-foot, and then, well, if I'm in like 22 feet, I'm looking at, you know, a 50-foot radius off of that center point. And so, you know, everything's, you know, gonna be moving together. And so, yeah, I figure it's gonna be about 40 foot of chain, and then another, you know, and then a bridle off of that.
I know across in Pipes Cove on the other side, the current is unbelievable over there, and a boat can spin against the wind.
Oh, easy.
Do they have any of that down on this side?
They get some wind against tide, but yeah, well, you know, the winds are light, you know.
It's only like on Wednesday night.
Yes. But no, it's the tide that's making the call most of the time during the season.
I'd like to get you guys to consider possibly reducing it from 8 to 7, which would allow them to expand the field somewhat, get a little bit more scope. It would keep.
It's like they're gonna need scope.
The outer ones.
Yeah.
That would be.
Could I just ask you guys a question? At the initial meeting, I had suggested that you all consider the overall parameters of the field that they'll be working in. And given the complexities that you're gonna face in this field and our historic preference for stipulating very specific coordinates within a mooring permit, it dawns on me that it's highly probable that regardless of the coordinates that you guys are permitted, if you're permitted some specific coordinates, you're not ultimately going to be able to end up on them because it's gonna be a matter of getting out there and seeing what's going on, and you had to go in 24 feet. To that end, it may be more prudent to define the parameters of where they can put however many moorings they're gonna be putting pursuant to this particular application process, if it happens to be 8 in this case. And then put them within that field in the safest ways possible for their operation and our, you know, underwater situation there, and everything like that. Because I think it would be sort of arrogant of us to say, it's gotta go on these coordinates because we laid it out with a tape measure on Google Earth or whatever and said they're 100-foot radiuses, when we know it's gonna be different when you go there. Rather than doing this back and forth, well, we permitted there and it can't go there and it's gonna go around and around and around. Just maybe consider a broader permitted area.
We're doing that with the yacht club now?
Are we doing that with the other ones?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But that would also maybe require Bert to note the coordinates and bring them back.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so there's follow-up, right? Like this is ultimately the end
Right.
area. But also, I think that it's somewhat naive to think that permitted coordinates remain the same into perpetuity, right? Like there has to be some leeway for all kinds of things, changes in the bottom and all of that. Anybody who's ever installed a mooring knows that, right? Like things happen. So, just moving forward, rather than handcuffing all of us to a very specific set of parameters that may be very difficult to actually achieve. If the intent is to get 8 safely placed moorings, then if that's permitted, I think we should give them the tools they need to be able to do that.
I think he made that point about a month ago. I was sitting in the same chair pretty much, defining the field. Because I remember writing it down, I think that's it more logical to define the field and let them work within that field for safety reasons than it is to try to actually pinpoint the coordinates. You know, if you have a defined field, you know, you have 8 moorings, you can pretty much lay it out, you know, depending on size of boats and depth of water, a little bit more logically, I would think, if you had a defined field.
Sure.
You can define field, you know, just extension of the property line in 25 feet.
Right, that's basically what we're.
And not to exceed.
Well, I mean, at some point, it's going to be impractical to exceed.
Right, I understand that, but if you want to ultimately wind up congregating the
Right.
smaller ones in a given area, let's say
Right.
away from the rocks, right, or
Right.
around that area or something.
I would agree, and then come back, you know, after the initial placement with coordinates, and then after the first season, if something has moved because of necessity, to, you know, to update the coordinates.
Well, that can be drawn on online mooring so that it appears.
Based on what I've heard from Bert, I can tell you, I'm personally, I know nothing about boats. I'm personally nervous about placing a mooring in more than about 30 to 32 feet of water. That feels to me like a limit.
Definitely.
And so, so when we get to that pretty quickly, another 50, 60 feet off, we're more than that. So you just take some soundings, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's just your budget, you know, I mean, I'll put in a 3,000 or 4,000 pound anchor for you and you don't have to worry about it, we'll go into 40-something feet. So I mean, I tried to keep the budget, I was looking at it, but that's why I was keeping it so close. And we were, you know, and I thought that's why, you know, I was doing it on that configuration, but I did, originally I measured, you know, I went by area, because I know my oyster grounds is, you know, 10 acres, I get 10 acres from the county, and I know that's 660 feet by 660 feet. So, you know, and when you look at the Pridwin, I think, what do you have, 500?
Well, feet, front is 650, almost 650.
You know, he's only 650 feet, you know, the frontage of the property, so if you went out, you know, 300 feet, you're 5 acres, you know, of land. I know conceptually what that means in terms of, you know, space, because I'm in my mooring, in my oyster grounds, and I know that's 600 feet. So I know in 10 acres, within that, I feel comfortable with eight boats, you know, and, or even, you know, more, but, you know, depending on their size. So that's why I kept it, you know, within that kind of bounds. And
Well, practically speaking, you know, for the purposes of the hotel and the whole reason to have them, you don't want them to hell and gone out in the middle, because you want them to be able to easily access the hotel.
Yeah, and you know, and you figure people are coming over, most of the things are gonna be smaller boats. You know, you're gonna have, I think up to, you know, you're gonna have the, you know, the 30-foot center consoles, and then you're gonna have the Hinckley, the 44 Hinckleys, and that's pretty much what you're gonna have coming in and hanging out there for the quick turnaround. So, you know, those boats, you know, they ride pretty well on mooring, and and they don't need much water, so, you know, particularly, but I didn't want to, I wanted to have, I designed it so that, you know, you have a lot of access to get into the dock and travel, you know, so I kept them off on the side over there, and also to keep it as far away from the camp as possible. And also give Stuart Carr access to be able to get to he's got a boat lift, so he can get in and out. And then there's a rock, you know, there that's pretty prevalent, and, you know, you don't want to encourage people to go inside in that area, you know. Sometimes one of them covers at high tide and the other one, you know, doesn't. But, you know, it's, so So they're gonna, hopefully that'll get marked, but so that's the reason why I kind of drew those circles.
I'm going to say I like the layout that you presented. The only change that I would make would be to eliminate M5. And
Right.
um,
Yeah, I mean, that,
we could go either way. We could draw out a field, I suppose, you know, it's something. We haven't done that before. And if, this layout's good, though. It's logical.
I like that field idea, just provided that there's the approach that you've designed in already to make sure that, you know, you're not having bunches of people coming up to the dock around the side. You know, that right now you've got a design where somebody can come straight in, and that makes sense to me. If you expand the field over, for instance, towards Quinnipiac, then all of a sudden, then you have people coming up to the dock through right around. And so I think
We would still want and expect boat traffic to approach either dock from the west, from the northwest. And so that's why, one of the reasons Bert kept that more open.
you know, I think M5 could be, you know, I mean, that does 50 feet, but I mean, you could just use it as for a 20-foot, 24-foot boat most of the time. I don't think it's, you know, gonna be, you know, you wouldn't put a sailboat there or, you know, or something. I think it's tackle on some of those inside ones are gonna be small.
Who will actually run the dock and the moorings?
So we'll have staff, our staff at the dock at all times during daylight hours.
Was there a specific, like, dock master? Somebody who's responsible, like, not a bunch of kids doing it?
No, there will be kids there helping, but there's actually two sort of more senior, we call them line managers. We don't have the title dock master, but one of those two will be at the dock at all times. And we're still trying to figure out again whether we have that person get a captain's license so they can tend people in and out, or whether we rely on the third-party tender services.
You're gonna expand with a launch too? Uh-oh.
We've always had a launch. We've always had two boats. We've had the fishing boat and then we've had a whaler.
Yeah, no? Good.
But frankly.
I remember a place that had like that too.
All right, let's see if we can narrow this down. So I'm just polling, how do we feel about 8 versus 7?
I'm good.
Besides which, on the 8?
8.
yeah.
You're good on the 8? You're good on the 8?
And I'm good in the field, you know, I mean, I like the idea of the positioning it in the field. I mean,
Okay,
you know, up to 8 moorings.
all right.
Are you going to delineate that field or?
I think we said extension of the property line, 25 feet in,
And yeah, but how far out? On this, it looks like you're 300.
30 feet water.
300 with your last mooring there, Bert? Is that what it looks like to you?
I think about, well, I mean, I think there's that 400-foot mark,
Oh, yeah, I see that.
you know.
Near Harvest Mooring.
Yeah,
Mhm.
25 feet from the property lines out to 400 feet perpendicular to the shore, right?
Yes.
I don't see the need for a field. If we go by this drawing and this layout, it works. So you're adding another layer of,
Well, Bo was just addressing the difficulty of pinpointing.
They could lay them down and then come back and give us the specific coordinates.
Yeah.
Which is traditionally, that's been done.
Right.
My guess is,
look, I don't,
It doesn't get done. That's the problem. Hence, you're looking at endless maps that don't coordinate with where things actually are. So just trying to save a few steps.
I don't need to tell Bert how to do his job, he's a professional. But I laid out our field and I used lobster buoys initially and put those out first. And I was doing one line at a time, but this would be, you could do the whole thing. I just tied sash weights onto them. I dropped them right on the GPS spot. And then after I did that, I stepped back in my boat and looked, are they in the line that I wanted them to be in? You only got 2 lines here.
Right.
And so I was able to get them pretty damn, within 5 feet of where I wanted them to be. So it's not, I don't think it's that difficult. If you lay it out initially with dummy buoys.
antifreeze jugs.
Milk jugs. Just-
I would just say, and I know Bruce's gonna kick me, just say if, as he goes to set them up, if he can't, in basically the same configuration, get 8 in because of conditions underwater, whatever it might be, if we have to start spreading them out and we can't get them in and stay, we'll reduce it to 7. I'd like to have 8, I'd like to have as many as possible, but if we can't fit the 8 in, basically in this configuration with some small changes, I personally don't want to send a mooring further out for a bunch of reasons. And Bert's convinced me that having closer in creates some issues in terms of paddleboard activity and other things. So if we can lay out 8, given the.
I can't see how you couldn't lay out 8. I mean, you'd have to be, yeah.
I think so too, but
You have
I'm
enough
just saying, if
space.
that happens, we would come back and say we only got 7 in.
If we stick with the drawing, that automatically creates a boundary. I'm just trying to
I'm
prevent,
okay with sticking with the drawing, I just want to make it work, I mean, so as long as they come back and let us know what the coordinates are,
Actually, are.
then okay.
right, if you have to move them, online mooring has a provision for that.
Yeah, we can move that, right. But
Go ahead.
You just have to know that.
no, it's not that, it's they all become de facto in violation of their permits, right? You're issuing a permit per resolution to a specified set of coordinates. So then, in theory, if they come back and say, we can't put it there at this time, you need to amend the permit. That really should be done through a formal process of changing the, right? We automatically create all these layers of things that aren't going to get accomplished.
But aren't there dozens and dozens and dozens of moorings in the water where there's a notation, the actual position is X,
Right, and
whereas
so-
the permitted location was Y.
Let's try to limit that.
Right, I'm just trying to stop the bleeding going forward. That's I try to divide and conquer, which is fine, and we can continue to do it this way. This should not be holding this up, like that's the concept is that 8 moorings can go there. How and with, under what circumstances you guys, or the town board ultimately issues a resolution, that's for them to work out.
Let me pose this thing. Bert, what do you think of that idea of putting the lobster buoys out first? Because if you say that sounds great to me, then Bo could confirm.
Convinced that 8 will fit in there, no problem.
Well, I think we're just creating, don't tell them how to do it. Just, if you want them in the spots where they say right now, then let's try and do that. If it works out, then it works out, then we're great. That's what the spots are. And if it doesn't, then they come back and tell us which ones didn't work.
Yeah, follow the pattern that already exists. That sounds
I could see for your grid why the lobster float thing was practical and worked out, because you really wanted to, you're talking about a lot of moorings.
John, you'd asked me earlier the question, it's nice to put things in writing, which of these, the sort of principles that I described, would we be willing to live with? It's really for you, but you asked me in the spirit of, working on this together, we'd certainly be comfortable with 2, 3, 4, and 7 on this list, so I'll read them. 2 is no overnight occupancy on any moored or docked boat. 3 is no daytime occupancy, basically other than getting to and from the moorings, or if you've got a crew there, but even if you do have a crew there. 4 is no running of engines, audio systems or generators while moored or docked. Those are things that we want anyway, so it's easy for us to live with. And then, I'd prefer not to have any limitation, because historically, some people told me, we got a letter from someone a couple months ago who come to visit, and they said they remembered 50 boats off the Prydwen. Remember the beach, that's nothing what we want. But, if you said no more than 16 boats, combination of mooring and tied up at the docks, which would be about half capacity of the docks and use of moorings, we're certainly happy to live with that. My suspicion is, as I say on the page, 6 to 12 boats is probably a likely peak on any given day.
Right.
So this may be more than we need. We may come back in a year's time and say, we're going to abandon a couple of moorings. I'm not promising that, but if they're not being used, we're not going to want to maintain a mooring. It's expensive and it takes up space. So Those 2, 3, 4, and 7 are certainly ones that we'd be willing to let you, or, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but those to me make logical sense to put into a resolution.
That helps me a lot, and the
Does that make
fact
sense?
that you've offered that up, yes, very, very much, and it highlights the uniqueness of this situation, as opposed to other situations on Shelter Island.
And why wouldn't you put all of them in? Just the fact that you wrote them, you're the author. Why wouldn't you put all of them in?
Because some of these start impacting more on the sort of marketing and commercial aspects of how people use them. A couple of them do. And I think we want to feel that out. Let us have the market tell us, have we missed something? Have we not thought of something? Are we being too
So
restrictive?
50 foot is not part of the,
It could be.
I mean, I'm not saying,
By the way,
like, 50 foot's a medium-sized boat now.
I'll tell you my concern about the 50-foot boat thing. We don't have a tape measure. We don't know all the boats. And someone who comes in a 54-foot boat says it's 47 feet.
But the reality of all this is nobody's gonna do that.
Yeah.
I mean, not.
Well, the only reason I didn't want to.
They're pumping sterns.
Everybody's doing it.
So, Jim, the only reason I didn't put one on
Maybe if it was
here,
in Cockles Harbor, they might.
all the others I proposed we can verify easily. The number one, we can't. We're gonna ask people when they approach we'll ask people when they make a reservation to come in. We're gonna ask people to make reservations. Someone may show up anyway. We're gonna ask them the size of their boat. If they say over 50 feet, we'll say, let's send around the point, or you've got to find a safe anchorage. Here's what we know in terms of resources, and, we'll pick you up. We'll send a car to pick you up. We don't have accommodations for you at the prison.
They could always drop their hook and then your tender could pick them up. I mean, that's the other thing.
We had an 80-foot boat that came in last year that went to the west of us, not off our property, but to the 85.
At Nordhaven that was out there?
What's that?
I think it was big Nordhaven.
It was like an 85-foot
Yeah,
boat.
I thought it was 100.
They didn't stay with us. They came for one meal and they went down to 2 meals at Sunset Beach, but I think they stayed overnight in the boat on anchor, about 200 feet offshore.
Yeah, I saw it.
It's not unusual in my place if a reservation comes in for a boat bigger than 45 feet. Whoever, they get a hold of me, John, is this spot okay? Is this boat okay? Because I need to protect I'm concerned about our liability too.
Sure.
So you're gonna be in the same situation. If you put a too big a boat on your tackle and something happens to it, now you're on the hook. So it's somewhat self-limiting if you're.
Yeah, I think the larger boats are generally gonna be crewed, and then you set, those boats, you can pick people up or they have their own tender and, you
What do you mean?
put them on the dock and then they tell them to go to Pipes Cove for 2 hours and then come back, that's, or spend the night over there and, the people are spending the night at the hotel or whatever, but.
Do you feel strongly about that?
But the size of the boat?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think what you want to avoid is somebody trying to squeeze a 70-foot boat in that area. I think, within reason, the 50-foot thing is probably a good yardstick. When it gets bigger than 50 feet, you look at it twice.
Well, my office calls me and says they're a 70-footer. I just say, oh, hell no.
We won't have tackle for it safely, and, from a liability standpoint, we won't allow it, and they shouldn't allow it either. They're signing off the form that they sign off on will say they understand that the tackle is designed for boats up to 50 feet. So, and that any boat that exceeds that length.
Of the 10 that you have written here, and there was 2, 3, 4, 7 that you checked off as required. I actually think that number 10 is also equally important. Britain will start all times to operate more in the dockage in a manner that's safe and respectful of neighbors, and I think that's something you brought up. And I think it's very important that you, because you do have neighbors here, that you are respectful of neighbors. I think it's something that answers your application.
Okay.
And something that you should strive for.
I know this is an advisory board and administrative function, not a police function, but if Bo or if anyone on this board sees directly, knows directly, believes that we're not operating correctly, separate from that boat, give me a call or come to the hotel. We'll address it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it'll happen. I just think it enhances it. It's respectful of your neighbors. And
I think the point you're making, Jim, it sets the tone of the whole.
Correct.
Of the whole deal. Maybe that should be number one. How we doing?
Good. Based on this drawing, I would, it seems to me that M5 is out of place, but looks like it could be moved and 8 could fit, so I'd be fine with 8.
I mean, scoot that whole road, scoot all of them over?
No, it just seems like it could be moved over to the side. It just seems like it's kind of on top of the dock.
You'd have to move all of them then.
Yeah. I don't know if you're seeing on your copy, but there's a green circle around M4.
Yeah.
That abuts directly. Maybe you get lost in the blue.
Got it, yeah.
It's not just the yellow.
It's faint, but
The
it's.
yellow is the existing mooring, and there's a green circle around it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So the swing, I mean, the swing on that M5, I mean, the distance between that sort of outside edge of that swing and then the line that is sort of the edge of the property is what sort of distance?
Well, if it's a 50-foot radius, it looks to me like it's about 10, 15 feet, something like that. But to the center, that would make it 60, 65 feet.
So is there a reason why all 8 of those why you put them scooched into the east as opposed to the west?
Well, on our west, we're right at the elbow of the road. So we can't go at a 90-degree angle out from our property line, I don't think. What Bert has done is bifurcated that angle so that we split the pane with our neighbor to the west. If you see the red line, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the blue line, I went parallel to the dock,
Right. But the red line is in a way to kind of bifurcate the angle. I think it's actually disfavoring us a little bit, but so we sort of consider that to be the extension of the property line, coming in at a bit of an angle because of how the road bends.
And still in here is the existing mooring, which is not going to be there.
Right.
So M5 could move that way.
Well, this is where you're missing the green circle.
Yeah, it stays there, Navo. Yeah.
Then 4.
It's hard to see.
Oh, I see, I got it.
Yeah, so I think 8 is tight. Now that you
You could put M5, I mean, if you put it next to between M4 and M8, then you're moving it to the north,
Be more in line with ours.
Right, you'd be a little bit more in line and, you'd be in a little bit deeper and you'd be further away from the property line then.
right.
So you'd be 4 and 4 instead of 5 and 3, in terms of the rows.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I did it, that was like a cost thing, it's like, okay, you want to, you can put M5, you put a small boat there, I'm not charging you, for the big tackle, that was kind of the way I was, when we first made our discussion, we had a little coffee, and he said, well, we want some small boats, we want some big boats, and so I said, okay, well, here's where the smaller boats will go.
So conceivably, that circle could.
Right, I used a large circle on it too. I could have gone in with a smaller circle on that. Mm-hmm. But
I'm okay with this as is. I'm not gonna try to design it.
Right.
Okay, so let's have a vote on 8, including 8 moorings. And install generally or exactly as they're been portrayed?
As close as possible.
Best efforts.
Generally.
As close as possible.
To the diagram that's been submitted. And with the stipulation on the resolution of 2, 3, 4, 7, and 10. See? I'm good. James?
I'm good.
Matt? Al?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Look at that.
I mean, it's a nice presentation, and I definitely like that you brought up, your operating principles and you brought those in. I think that was really good.
Yeah.
This is separate from the app. First of all, thank you all for your time and attention and for letting us do this. I'll pledge that we'll do this as responsibly as possible, and we will come back if we make adjustments and give the actual locations, whether we need to formally apply or not. There's no smoke and mirrors here. It's what we're doing it for. If we only have peak demand of fewer than 8 moorings, we may come back and say, we'll get rid of it for a couple years. What I was really gonna say though is, I know it's not anyone's desire to have to play police, but we are a commercial mooring, that makes us different. And in my opinion, you ought to feel like you have another bite at the apple. If you feel like we baited and switched something or really done a poor job, punish us by taking moorings away.
I don't want to do that.
I know you probably don't want to do that. I promise that we'll avoid it, but we realize this is a privilege, and it's up to us to install them correctly and operate them correctly.
And if for some reason you change your mind, you still have May 1st WMAC and you still have the public hearing, right?
Right. Can I just ask, I haven't heard, but has there been any letters to this body or that any of concern, anything we should be addressing from the public?
Not that we have received thus far.
Okay.
But, you know.
Never know.
Okay. One never knows, no.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's very productive. I think you guys did a great job. Nice presentation. I think you did a nice job going through this very carefully.
Thank you.
Working together.
Thank you all.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good job.